With the NBA playoffs around the corner, I figured now would be a great time to discuss what teams in either conference really have any chance of winning the title, which team I think is going to win the conference. We're going to break this down into two parts, and this is part one going over the Eastern Conference. Hello everybody, welcome to Ostrosty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Also look out for our stream tomorrow with our editor Nick, who is going to be on as a special guest. Going to be a fun pod, so link will be in the description. All of that. Be there Wednesday at I think 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. Just for the sake of simplicity and visualizing all this, we decided to put all of the Eastern Conference teams into a tier list. Of course, at the bottom in the F and E category, those are teams that we really do not even have to ponder their playoff ability. Charlotte, Washington, Detroit, they're just not going to make the playoffs. There's just no way. I think the Wizards have already been eliminated. The Pistons are right there with them. The Hornets are notably better than both of those teams, but nevertheless still the third worst team in the NBA. Or rather, the third worst team in the Eastern Conference, that is. So down in the D tier, these are play-in tier teams. There are other teams above them that will also hypothetically be in the play-in, because I do have 8 teams above them, but these are like lower tier, like maybe they'll sneak in the play-in, but probably not. Those teams being the Atlanta Hawks, Chicago Bulls, Toronto Raptors, and Brooklyn Nets. Of these 4, I actually think the Chicago Bulls would be the best hypothetical playoff team. I just think they have the most well-rounded roster. I like their dynamic a little bit more now that they've got DeMar and Kobe White as the lead options and Zach LaVine's really out of town. That said, none of these teams are good, and none of them would even win more than max 2 games in any individual playoff series. And if I had to guess, I also don't think they're going to make it through the play-in. So yeah, moving on, we're going to talk about the teams that I think are true playoff teams in the Eastern Conference. Towards the bottom of that tier right now are the Indiana Pacers and the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic are the 4th seed in the East right now, and I understand that that's pretty good, but they are pretty far from contending to me right now. They just don't have the experience. They don't have the star power. The three-point shooting for them is better than I thought it would be, but it's still not elite. Overall, I think they could be a decent playoff team for sure, but I am just not expecting a lot out of them. The Indiana Pacers just don't play enough defense. I do also feel weird about them since the Pascal Siakam trade. They didn't really move the needle in any way, so that is a little concerning to me. I just don't think that they are going to be all that serious of a contender in the playoffs. The Pacers have been one of the most fun teams in the league to me, but I just don't know about them actually being a really competitive team. I could see them taking like 2 games off of a genuine contender, but that's the absolute max. You'd really have to get a super insane Tyrese Maxey series for something like that to happen. Tyrese Halliburton. So yeah, moving on from them, we're getting to some teams that I think genuinely could win the East. At the bare minimum, they could. Not necessarily my top picks for the first teams I'm going to mention, but teams that could win the East nevertheless. Those being the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers, ironically in a similar tier after being similar seeds last year. Now, as of right now, the New York Knicks are actually dropping in the standings quite a bit because they do not have Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson just got hurt the other day against the Cavs, I want to say. So that's not helping in their standings, and I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, how it's going to affect them in the postseason, but I will say when that roster is fully healthy after the OG trade, they looked awesome. They were one of the best teams in the NBA from like every statistical standpoint almost. Good sign for them that they could actually be pretty decent. They obviously made the second round this previous year and honestly could have been more competitive with Miami. I don't know, that series is so weird to me, but it felt like New York had them for a little bit, but then they didn't. I think this team, at least if they can get healthy in time, would be much better than the Knicks were last year, which means winning that second round series is achievable. Like, I definitely think that this Knicks team would do substantially better than that Knicks team did in that series if we were to run it with this roster. So I feel pretty damn good about the Knicks. Still not quite in a contender category to me, but like just above it. I guess they're more or less dark horses in the conference, and that goes the same for the Cavaliers, where there are a couple of teams that I just feel better about in that conference. But the Cavaliers have a damn good roster. They obviously disappointed rather significantly last year against the Knicks in round 1, losing in 5 games. Donovan Mitchell played bad. Jarrett Allen played bad. So I do have concerns about them. And Darius Garland has been not so good this year, although he has gotten better as the season's gone along. I have liked their role players a little bit more than I have in the past, especially at wing. But that said, I still just can't quite put this team in a contender category. The spacing when you have Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen is something that gets exploited in the postseason. Donovan Mitchell he had the reputation of a playoff riser, but he's had a couple of different instances now where he didn't really live up to that. He didn't live up to it this previous time. Again, I have my concerns about Darius Garland. I remember him also being bad in that series, if I'm not mistaken. As a whole, Cleveland just doesn't quite have enough for me to put them in the contender category. So that leaves the Eastern Conference with 4 teams that I would consider contenders, with kind of 2 asterisks next to 2 of them. And for me, the way that I have always differentiated this is that there are top tier contenders. Like, there's 2 tiers of contenders. I don't want to say A, because for a tier list, technically there's an S tier. We have the top tier, which is legit, unquestioned, no doubt about it, this team can win a championship. And then there's the second tier, which is, I think this team can win a championship, but they're definitely not my first pick. Sometimes you can have multiple teams in the top tier. That's just the way that it goes. Either way, there's different levels to it. Every once in a while, a B tier or a second tier contender will break through, but almost always those top tier contenders are the ones that actually win it. In that lower tier, the second tier of contenders, I have the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the Heat, ironically, are an example of one of those teams that actually broke through, being a B tier contender, because I had them as a B tier contender last year, and then they made their way all the way to the freaking finals. The Sixers and the Heat have a little bit of an asterisk. The Heat had that 1 year versus Milwaukee where they just got absolutely destroyed. I don't know. I feel like the Heat have the potential to still do something like that, just as much as they have the potential to, make a finals run out of nowhere again. So I realize that they're the 8th seed. Like, obviously, that hasn't really mattered for the Miami Heat in the past anyways, so I'm not really going to treat it like it matters. As for the actual roster this year, I actually do like the roster more than last year's Heat, the Heat before that. Really, I like this roster more than any version of the Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo Heat. Terry Rozier was a nice addition. Tyler Hero, hopefully being around for this playoff run. How applicable he will be because of his defensive disadvantages, who knows, but at the bare minimum, he will be able to contribute something, just because he is a very good scorer and especially shot creator, and that was something that the Heat were sorely missing in this postseason. They also got DeLon Wright, I believe, who's been good for them. So yeah, the Miami Heat, I think, improved their roster. Obviously, their rookie Jaime Jaquez is one of my favorite rookies in the entire NBA, and I think he'll be able to make pretty significant improvements. Nikola Jovic has been playing a lot better lately. Duncan Robinson is awesome now. I just feel very good about this Heat team, and I understand the regular season success not being there, but like, what, am I going to doubt them for that again? Are we really going to do that? I'm just going to follow the logic of the Heat are going to blow my mind, so I'm only going to anticipate things that are beyond what makes sense, because that's the tier that they have hit pretty much every single time when they run into the playoffs. So 3 out of the 4 years they've made an Eastern Conference Finals run. Pretty impressive, I would say. So a little bit of an asterisk, though, just because they are the 8th seed, like, maybe the magic trick ends this year. The Sixers, the asterisk is around Joel Embiid and his health, because he is going to be coming back at the end of March, and that will be interesting. I don't know exactly how the Sixers are going to look, how he's going to look. If Embiid looks fully healthy going into the postseason, and especially if there's enough time to, get the roster back acclimated to Embiid being there, I'm not too concerned that they will struggle with adapting with him just having been gone for a while. But there's always growing pains like that, and it's especially not ideal to jump right into a playoff setting with something like that being dealt with. So hopefully he'd have a couple of games to warm up to close the year. Hopefully he didn't get out of shape because he was sitting there waiting for this injury to rehab, because that's something that can happen, and I know Joel Embiid has struggled with that in the past. And then just dealing with the nagging injury going into the postseason, how much is it going to affect his play and things of that nature. But that said, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that Joel Embiid will be Joel Embiid, and I think even like in a hot takes for this year said that this will be the year that Joel Embiid finally doesn't choke in the playoffs, and I think that's very plausible. I really don't have a strong reason for it. It's just a gut feeling. But yeah, the Sixers, if Embiid's really healthy, definitely a dangerous team. So yeah, the Milwaukee Bucks. Fun fact about them, they've been a really good defense since Doc Rivers has been there, which I expected Doc Rivers to be a technical improvement over Adrian Griffin, but I didn't expect it to be as glaringly obvious as it has been. I still hold firm that hiring Doc Rivers was a mistake, because I think you should just hire somebody who has a higher ceiling than Doc Rivers and won't consistently be a problem for you in the postseason, as Doc Rivers has been throughout his entire career. But at the bare minimum, he has been better than one of the worst coaches in the league. Congratulations, Doc Rivers, for that. But that does mean that the Bucks defense is not as much of a concern as it used to be, and the offense remains awesome in spite of the fact that Damian Lillard has been disappointing this year. Really, this team should be in the top tier of contenders, but they have just a bunch of different logistical issues, the defense not being as good being one of the main ones, so that is a reason to keep them out of it. I do feel like this upcoming season, they will definitely be in that tier. I think it just takes a little bit of time for them to really figure themselves out. That said, I also think this team easily has the best chance to be the only team that could beat Boston, because, spoiler alert, Boston is my only tier 1 or my S tier contenders in the Eastern Conference. The Boston Celtics, it's their conference finals to lose, okay? If Boston doesn't make the finals, it is a severe disappointment. There is no other way to put it. They have the best roster in the entire NBA. They have listen to me again, 5 top 50 players in the entire NBA. Pretty fucking good. It's pretty fucking good. The dynamic that Kristaps Porzingis has brought to that team on both ends of the floor, Derek White being so good, and even so much better offensively than we knew him to be this year, being more of a ball handler and on-ball creator than any other point in his career. Drew Holiday as your 5th best player is insane. Jaylen Brown's a little bit overrated, but he's still a 20-point scorer who plays good defense. And Jason Tatum is still a superstar player. He's not my first pick for a guy to lead my championship team, but if the rest of the roster is that good, you're fine settling a little bit on your best player. And even then, Jason Tatum is a pretty damn good player to settle for. I would certainly settle for him on the Chicago Bulls, but nevertheless, that's not happening. So yeah, the Celtics, definitely the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. After that, if I'm just going on odds, I would probably go Celtics, Bucks, Sixers, Heat. Then after that, like, Cavs, Knicks is really dependent on how healthy the Knicks get. If the Knicks are fully healthy, Knicks over Cavs. After that, pretty much every other team in the East I don't think has any shot at all. That's how I feel about the Eastern Conference playoffs as of right now. Make sure to tune into part 2 where you are going to get my evaluation of the Western Conference playoffs. But that is it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye. Rudy! Oh my God. Rudy!